All right. Your leadership chapter spends some time in talking about a group of studies and kind of what they have in common. This is important because it's a nice recognition of how we got where we are today in our view of what a leader is. And much of this has stayed intact. There are many new leadership theories, charismatic transformational leadership, stewardship type leadership theories, lots of new stuff. But fundamentally, it persists that we have this recognition that people either have kind of a concern or a bias toward taking care of people, or a concern and a bias toward getting things done. Now, clearly, any mature thinker knows that an effective manager has both. But the prevailing thought is that we have a bias as individuals because of our personality. We tend to lead to get things done, or we lead to make people happy. The University of Iowa, the University of Michigan, Ohio State, and the managerial grid were independent studies by different universities around the same time frame, 1930 all the way up to 1957, when the managerial grid was published. Probably the most known study for you guys. And for instance, a concern for people was called autocratic, a concern for production. Autocratic, production, task, or production, again. And a concern for people was called democratic, employee-oriented, relationship-oriented, or people-oriented. Different words, different terminology, but saying really the same thing. And then, of course, the University of Iowa had this laissez-faire, which means, neither, I don't care. And managerial grid had other styles to it. And then they kind of concluded, what's the best style? Well, I want to talk about one theory, Fiedler's theory, who had some prescriptive advice. And I think though it's not been found in the long run to be that useful, mainly because it's not measurable, it was a good attempt, and it explains something that I think is very true for us today. Fiedler wanted to first measure this thing that everyone was talking about. He wanted to measure the manager and conclude as to whether the manager was a people manager or a task type manager. He did that by creating this questionnaire that was called LPC, or least preferred coworker. And it was a roundabout way to say, describe the person that you work least well with. That you like working with the least. And if you describe that person as someone that you get things done through, then you like them, even though you claim to enjoy working with them, even though you don't like them personally, then you like that you got work done. Conversely, if you claim that you didn't like someone who you didn't get along with, then the getting along with part was the most important. And I didn't say that very well, but neither did he. And this wasn't very well operationalized, and it didn't turn out to really measure much of anything. But that doesn't take away from the theory, because no one else has been able to really measure that. I don't know the extent to which it's entirely true, but it is still really resident in our thinking about leadership. If you look at that chart that has the beige on the top, and it's got that mountain-looking line through it, just look at Fiedler stuff and you'll see it right away. It's basically saying, hey, look, first of all, there are circumstances in which you need a people person to lead an organization. There's times in which you need someone very task-oriented. Let me give you an example. I was dating this girl named Suzanne back in my master's program, and Suzanne's claim to fame, as far as I'm concerned, is that her dad he had gone to Harvard as an attorney, and then he had been the CEO of Piedmont Airlines, and then he stepped down from that. They got bought out or something, and I met him when he wasn't working. He was very wealthy. He had a DeLorean. I remember it's my chance to sit in a DeLorean and different cars in a big house. We house sat for him. But anyway, during the time that I was dating Suzanne, he was selected to take over as CEO of Trans World America, TWA, the airline. That was pretty big stuff, because TWA, one of the biggest airlines in the nation. And the reason he was being brought in is because TWA was just emerging from bankruptcy. And you'll probably know this. Bankruptcy is usually, or often, not, close the doors, but renegotiate with creditors according to the bankruptcy court's rulings. You have to make payments for a period of time, and then you can exit bankruptcy, and usually the court will relieve you of some amount of this debt burden that you had as an organization so that you can survive. And so they had put in place a CEO who had been their chief financial officer. This person, this man, was excellent at the details. He was excellent at making sure all the payments got made. The board put the right person in the right place. And he saw to it that TWA was exiting their bankruptcy, having met satisfactorily all the requirements the bankruptcy court had placed on them. But now, as they exited the bankruptcy, there was a new, most critical element they needed to address. For all this time, the 5 or 7 years or something that they were in bankruptcy, the employees had lost the right to collectively bargain. So that means all the pilots and all the stewardess and all the baggage handlers and all the gatekeepers and everyone who worked for the airline had not had a pay raise, and they were jonesing for that. And they were going to jump on that right away. So this person who had led the organization all the way through this very troubled time was then going to be asked to take a second seat. And Suzanne's father was going to step in because he was heralded as good with people. Now, I don't know where they get that from, because I met the man. Maybe it was because I was dating his daughter, but he didn't seem like a people person to me, or maybe he just didn't like me. But when you look at Fiedler's contingency model here, you see that a task-oriented manager is effective, according to this theory and data collected, when things are either very good or very bad. But when things are just in the middle, a relationship-oriented person is more effective. Now, here's why that makes sense to me. When things are very bad and our organization is not achieving the financial and industry success that we know we should be, and we're in trouble, and we get a new leader on board, what kind of a leader will I respond to? Will I respond to someone who's motivational and just encouraging and giving attaboys? Or will I be more receptive to a leader who's very strong and task-oriented and is drilling down to actually not what things feel like, but what needs to get done, and has a lot of confidence and drive in task-oriented behavior? Well, I think if things are really bad, I'm looking for a savior. I'm looking for someone to come in with ideas and implement them. And don't worry about how we feel right now. That's got to take second seat. And also, when things are just very, very good, when things are very good in our organization and we're breaking all these industry records and money is just pouring in, and our relations with one another are good. And this means the 3 elements that he looked at in terms of conditions were leader-member relations, task structure, and leader position power. And when the leader has lots of power, when the leader position is strong, and when leader-member relations are very good, then I don't need a directive, task-oriented leader. Things are very good. Why would you come in and tell me what we need to do differently? We don't need to do things differently. What we need now is we need someone to encourage us to continue to do what we've been doing, which is working and is evident in our success. So this might account for why we read the news and we see CEOs being fired or displaced. The average tenure of a CEO is relatively short, and they tend to move from one position to another. One reason might be because the needs of the organization change in its life cycle. And boards of directors believe that one leader is better suited for the different conditions that prevail in that industry for that company at that time. So being fired as a CEO probably doesn't mean the same thing as if you or I got fired in our regular jobs, because we understand you're the key point person leading the whole organization, setting the tone and direction and vision for the future. So I like this theory because it highlights 2 things. One, that people can be task or relationship oriented. Task or people oriented. And also that there probably are times when we hit our limits. I'm probably a people-oriented person. I probably am more concerned with the well-being and happiness and goodwill of people in an organization. I think work is a place where we live. And so first and foremost, living needs to be have security and warmth and goodwill and these things. But I also want to get things done, and I know that if we don't get things done, we can't continue to exist. But I'm probably more people-oriented than task. I don't know how you are, but it's worth thinking about that. I know that there are times when I need to be on guard because I'm overly concerned with people to the point at which I might easily neglect task completion, and that's going to be a mistake for me. You might be on the other end of the continuum, really focused on task orientation, but neglecting the needs, wants, desires, and the real human element in the organization. That could be a problem for you. I believe that we all have the ability to flex our personalities, that for a period of time, even though I'm fairly relationship oriented by disposition, by personality, by my heart, I have the ability for periods of time, even long periods of time, to be very on task when I know that it's mission critical. And I think if you're on the other end of the continuum and you're task oriented, you have the ability to focus on people. That might take a little more effort because we're mostly trained to be task oriented. So if we're people oriented, we can always pick up on some of the tasks. But if you're task oriented, you may not have ever learned the skills of focusing on well-being of people. So that might be a skill set that you need to develop a little further as the needs occur. Hopefully that's insightful. Hope you enjoyed it.